Good afternoon, and welcome to everyone who's joining us on the internet. Before we begin reading, I want to remind you of something we read a couple of weeks ago. The statement being, the Holy Spirit is nothing more than your real mind. You will find me emphasizing this somewhat frequently because in the first and second editions of the course, that statement was changed to read, the Holy Spirit is in your mind. What I said to Helen was, the Holy Spirit is nothing more than your real mind. I am emphasizing this repetitively because if you only have the first or second edition of the course available to you, you have no occasion to hear what I actually said, which is significantly different in its meaning. And so you need to be reminded. The Holy Spirit is nothing more than your real mind. Why say nothing more? That in a way sounds belittling. But what it actually is, it is expansive in terms of what your real mind is. Your real mind is the Holy Spirit. Now, I'm also going to repeat again that the Holy Spirit, your real mind, works on the basis of entirely different laws than your egos do. Your egos operate according to the mutually agreed upon definitions that all of you have created together. The Holy Spirit operates according to the laws of God. Mind you, although we're talking about your ego and we're talking about the Holy Spirit, we are talking about two different ways of discussing you. You see that? We're talking about two different ways of discussing you. If you're into computers, you will understand that you can have two different operating systems. And a good example of that is the operating system that the Macintosh uses and the Windows operating system. When you use a Windows operating system, you cannot access and work in programs written for the Mac. And if you have a Mac, you cannot access and utilize programs that are written for Windows. A better example could be the difference between Windows and Linux, because both of those operating systems can function on a PC. The Holy Spirit is one operating system, and your egos are another operating system. It's important to understand this because there's no transfer between the two. And that is why when I speak about your accessing that place of excellence in you, I'm not talking about a place of excellence, of goodwill, of loving kindness, of thoughtfulness, or of anything that would operate within the realm of your ego perception of yourself. That is not what I'm talking about. It isn't the very best of your ego. The place of excellence in you is where this other operating system is functioning, where the Holy Spirit is, where your real mind is functioning right now, even though you're not paying any attention to it as a general rule. And as I said last week, the Course is not addressing your ego to improve it. It is addressing the truth about the place of excellence in you, the Holy Spirit, that which is nothing more than your real mind. And in addressing it, it reminds you of it so that you become less invested in your ego sense of things and will arrive at a point of saying, I think I may want to change operating systems for a bit and explore what it's like to be out from my real mind. Because they are exclusive of each other, you must reach out to something that at the moment seems not to be you. You can't just slip into your divinity, because your operating system has been one of aggressive and specific and focused use of the kingdom of heaven for the purpose of securing your separate safety, security, and peace, as well as a well-defined sense of who you are on your own. So, initially, it will seem as though the Holy Spirit is something different from you. And you will specifically have to reach out for it, as though it is different from you. But if you understand, as you do this, that the Holy Spirit is nothing more than your real mind, you will be willing to reach out for it as though it's different from you, because you want to experience the difference. You want to experience the difference in the operating system. And knowing that it is nothing more than your real mind that you are reaching out for will give you a sense of confidence that this is a reasonable and intelligent and safe thing to do. I've shared this before, and it bears repeating again. When Paul sits down at a gathering, before he begins, he shifts gears. He changes operating systems. He sits there and says, I allow only, that's making one, I allow only for that which expresses the Christ consciousness. And I allow only for that which is in harmony with the capital P purpose of capital B being, God. In other words, thy will, not mine, be done. There's the transfer of power. There's the shift of operating systems. thy will, not mine, be done. Let the reign of divine truth, life, and love be established in me. And when he says this, these are not just words. He is saying, let the reign of divine truth, life, and love be established in him, and rule out of me all self-will. There's the abandonment of the other operating system. And then there's a prayer. And may thy word enrich the affections of all mankind and govern them. Now, in order to practice, shall I say, in order to practice the Holy Spirit, not a good choice of words, but it gives you the idea. In order to practice the Holy Spirit, you must make a point of shifting operating systems, or intending to shift them, many times a day. That is what I encourage you to do. Remind yourself that there's another operating system from which you can be in your daily life. Remind yourself, and then invite it. And in the invitation, acknowledge that you're willing to abandon all self-will, which means being in charge. This section is entitled The Guide to Salvation. Well, the guide to salvation is the Holy Spirit. That which comes forth from the place of excellence in you. The way to learn to know your brother. Notice it didn't say the way to learn how to wake up. The Course keeps you well focused on where it's at. Waking up has something to do with you learning to know your brother. The way to learn to know your brother is by perceiving the Holy Spirit in him. We have already said that the Holy Spirit is the bridge or thought transfer of perception to knowledge. In other words, it is the shift from misperception of your brother or misperception of the kingdom of heaven into the experience of knowing your brother, knowing the kingdom of heaven, the direct experience of what it truly is. We have already said that the Holy Spirit is the bridge or thought transfer of perception to knowledge. So we can use the terms as if they were related, because in his mind, the Holy Spirit's, they are. The relationship must be in his mind, because unless it were, the separation between the two ways of thinking would not be open to healing. In other words, the Holy Spirit must be able to recognize both operating systems. Because if it didn't, it could not help you, to shift from one to the other. It would be impossible, and you would be forever asleep. He, the Holy Spirit, is part of the Holy Trinity, because his mind is partly yours and also partly God's. This needs clarification, not in statement, since we have said it before, but in experience. Well, how do you think it's going to translate into experience if it doesn't involve your relationship with your brother? Involvement. It won't. It can't. Now you notice that I have not invited your questions for a while, and we've just been discussing the Course. And the reason is because at this point there's a very clear exposition of the way things work and what it is that's working. And this understanding must be gained, I'm going to say intellectually, if you're going to arrive at a point where you're willing to yield to the Holy Spirit. You must understand that the Holy Spirit is not something apart and different from you, but is your real mind. Now, continuing, the Holy Spirit is the idea of healing. Being thought, the idea gains as it is shared. Again, how is it going to be shared if it isn't extended to a brother or a sister? How is it going to be shared if there isn't involvement? Continuing. Being the call for God, it is also the idea of God. You see, it is the idea of something that isn't embraced in the ego operating system. Since you are part of God, it is also the idea of yourself, as well as of all the parts of God. So you see, what the Holy Spirit is, as you consider it, as you open up to it, is far more expansive and all-inclusive than you might have imagined, which means that your real mind is far more inclusive and expansive than you might imagine. Continuing, the idea of the Holy Spirit shares the property of other ideas because it follows the laws of the universe of which it is a part. Mind you, all of this is talking about you. Isn't it far more interesting to be reading about you than some disembodied Holy Spirit that God brought into existence the moment you chose to be separate and is there to be your distant but really connected guide? Your guide is your right mind that reflects God and functions according to the laws of God and is therefore inseparable from the whole universe and inseparable consciously. I'm going to say mentally, but that's not the best word. It is inseparable consciously with every other consciousness. And so your right mind is the intimate, conscious experience of everything and everyone with no walls. And in that experience, you find that everything and everyone is you, infinitely speaking, but not you like you ever considered yourself before. You infinitely, you, the very presence of the mind of God, being what God is being. Don't fuss. Don't wish you could ask questions right now. Just hear the meanings that I'm expressing and let them register and let them settle. Let them be in you. Again, the idea of the Holy Spirit shares the property of other ideas because it follows the laws of the universe of which it is a part. Therefore, it is strengthened by being given away. It increases in you as you give it to your brothers. This you that it is speaking of, that it increases in, is this tiny, isolated sense of yourself. And as long as you're insisting upon being tiny and isolated and alone, with distance, walls, impenetrability between you and your brothers and sisters, then the only way in which this new operating system is going to take precedence is when you consciously choose to extend the Father's love to your brothers and sisters. And as that is done, it increases the idea of the Holy Spirit. It increases the presence of the Holy Spirit both in you and in your brothers and sisters. Continuing, since thoughts do not have to be conscious to exist, your brother does not have to be aware of the Holy Spirit, either in himself or in you, for this miracle to occur. Again, a little bit of leaven leavens the whole lump. Your increasing awareness of the existence of the Holy Spirit as your real mind, and the lessening of your resistance to that fact, leavens the whole of the brotherhood of man. It changes everyone. Those who are awake experience you as being more conscious of them, and those who are not awake are, to some degree, less asleep than before. And no one has to be aware of it in order for it to occur, as long as one of you is making the shift of operating systems, even if it's for a fraction of a second. Continuing, your brother may have dissociated the call for God just as you have. In other words, put it out of sight, out of mind, and is ignoring it so that it can have the frightful delight of believing that he or she is independent, alone, vulnerable, but capable of overcoming the vulnerability, and in the process of overcoming the vulnerability, demonstrating its actual existence. Crazy. Continuing, your brother, reading again, your brother may have dissociated the call for God just as you have. The dissociation is healed in both of you as you become aware of the call for God in Him, and thus acknowledge its being. You know, if you realize even slightly that there's the Holy Spirit in you, the call for God in you, you immediately recognize that it's true of every one of your brothers and sisters. And so now a new set of messengers have been sent out into your world, to your brothers and sisters, that must come back to you confirming the Holy Spirit in them. And now the leavening has increased. Continuing, there are two ways of seeing your brother, which are diametrically opposed to each other. They must both be in your mind, because you are the perceiver. Mind you, it doesn't say you are the knower, the capital K, knowing of truth. You are the perceiver. They must also be in his, because you are perceiving him. Now let's be clear here. It doesn't mean that it must actually be in him, but because you are in a state of perception, everything that is true about you will have to be true about him in your mind. What is the answer to this? The solution? I'm reading. See him through the Holy Spirit in his mind. And here the word his refers to Holy Spirit. See him, your brother, through the Holy Spirit in his, the Holy Spirit's mind, and you will recognize him, the Holy Spirit, in yours. What you acknowledge in your brother, you are acknowledging in yourself, and what you share, you strengthen. Now again, understand that this is a law. What you share, you strengthen, and it's true in both operating systems. And so what you share from the ego strengthens the ego. And what you share from the Holy Spirit, the other operating system in you, is strengthened. Now, just for one further point of clarity, there's really only one operating system, and it's the Holy Spirit. The operating system called the ego is an imagined operating system, made up out of whole cloth, out of absolutely nothing, pure fantasy. But being the Christ that you are, being the holy son or daughter of God that you are, that you can't stop being, you are using all of your divine power, if I may put it that way, to energize your fantasy. And you are bringing all of your omnipotent capacity to bear upon the reinforcement of your fantasy and the commitment to your fantasy, so that you become highly focused, so highly focused on your fantasy that you block everything else out, and you seem to make your fantasy real to you. But understand this, all the time that you are seeming to succeed in making a fantasy real, you are doing it with that which will forever keep it false. You are using your capacity as the Christ, which means that that which negates the false sense of you is ever present and keeping the sense of yourself that you're trying to establish from